There is a thought that keeps finding you. You set it down, and it returns. You redirect it, and it waits. Not loudly. It has no urgency behind it, but with a kind of patient insistence that tells you it is not going anywhere until you look directly at it. It is a thought about someone. Maybe more than one person. Maybe the same person it has always been. And the thought is not a question. It is a statement that your mind keeps trying to reclassify as a question, because a statement would require you to act on it. The thought is, you already know. You already know who loves you. You have known it for longer than you've admitted. You have known which presence in your life makes you feel more like yourself, and which one leaves you arranging yourself differently to fit inside its orbit. You have known which conversations leave you quieter than when you entered them, and which ones leave you more whole. The part of you that has been tracking this truth quietly, not in words, not in lists, not in conversations you've had with anyone else. That part brought you here today, not the algorithm. Something older and more precise than that. If something in the first minute of this already landed, like the video, subscribe and comment, I already know. Not for the algorithm, for you. As proof to yourself that you showed up for this. Because what is happening in the sky today is not subtle. And what it does to the truths that have been living below the surface of your ordinary life is not gradual. Today they surface. Not because you forced them, because the sky stopped letting them stay down. There is a specific kind of person this day was designed for. And the way to recognize if that is you is simple. You have been asking yourself the harder question. Not, why won't they show up fully? Though you have asked that too. The deeper one. What does this gap reveal about what you actually need? Not, what did I do that made this pattern repeat? The one underneath it. What truth about myself am I protecting by staying inside this dynamic? There was a moment, maybe more than one, but there is always a central one. When the comfortable version of the situation was right there in front of you. The version where you didn't have to look at what was actually happening. The version where partial presence could still be called love if you framed it the right way. And you looked at the real version instead. Not because it was easier, because the easier version had a specific hollowness to it that your body could feel before your mind could name it. What does that feel like, to choose the harder truth? It feels like being the only person in a conversation who is actually in the conversation. It feels like a stillness that has weight to it, like something settling rather than closing. Like you picked up the object in both hands and actually looked at it instead of examining it through the glass of what you wanted it to be. This is not self-punishment. This is intelligence. And that intelligence, the specific refusal to accept a comfortable story that doesn't hold, is exactly what unlocked today. This is why the door does not open simply because someone wants answers. Wanting answers is not the same as having done the work of looking at real ones. The door opens for the person who already looked, at cost, before they knew what the looking would produce. Most people wait for the truth to arrive from outside. You went looking for it inside when the outside was still offering you an easier answer. That is not a small thing. The door that opens today is a direct consequence of that choice. And what it opens onto is not a revelation. It is a confirmation of something you have already been carrying. Today, the moon moved into Aries. That is the headline. But what it means for you specifically, and for the 4 truths that are surfacing right now, goes deeper than a moon sign. The moon in astrology is not about thought. It is about what your body knows before your mind has formed the words. It is the part of you that responds before it reflects. The part that went quiet in certain rooms and came alive in others, that relaxed in certain presences and tightened in others, that has been keeping a precise emotional record long before you understood what you were recording. The moon is the body's intelligence. It is the part of you that loves without logic and grieves without permission and recognizes without explanation. When you walk into a room and something in you shifts before a single word has been exchanged, that is the moon. It is the oldest, most honest part of the emotional body. When the moon moves into Aries, that intelligence stops being patient. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It is the energy of beginning, of initiation, of the moment before hesitation arrives. It does not carry old business carefully. It moves forward. It does not ask for permission to arrive. And when the body's deepest knowing, the moon, meets the energy of forward motion, Aries, what happens is this. The truths you have been carrying quietly stop waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. They are ready now. They are pushing into your awareness with a directness that has nothing apologetic about it. Here is what makes today different from any other day you have felt this kind of knowing. Venus and Jupiter are also exactly aligned in the sky right now, at the same degree of Cancer. Venus governs what you love and what you value, what you reach toward, what you protect, what you will not trade away. Jupiter governs what is real, what is lasting, what deserves to grow. When those two align, especially in Cancer, the sign of emotional depth and genuine belonging, they create a moment where the truth about love is not a whisper. It is a resonance you can feel in your hands. What you value and what is actually worthy of your value become visible at the same time. The pretenses fall. What remains is real. The four truths that surface in this window are not new. Your heart has known all four of them for a while now. The first is about what real love actually feels like from the inside. Not what it looks like from outside, but the felt quality of being inside it. The second is about consistency. The difference between someone who loves you when it is convenient and someone whose care does not depend on circumstances or their mood or what else is happening in their life. The third is about the specific thing real love never does to your perception of yourself. And you know this one because you have experienced its opposite. And the fourth is the one people rarely name out loud, but always feel. What it is like to be with someone who genuinely loves you, as opposed to someone whose presence requires labor. This is not a summary of what love should be. This is a description of what you have already been living and already measuring, before you had words for it. The moon in Aries is not introducing these truths. It is making them undeniable. This is why this specific transit lands differently than other emotional awakenings. It is not asking you to feel something new. It is asking you to fully acknowledge what you have already been quietly, accurately feeling. This is not wishful thinking surfacing. This is clarity completing its formation. This day does not open for everyone. It opens for people who have been doing a specific kind of internal work, not loudly, not with visible results, not in any way that others have recognized or confirmed. There was a moment, and you know exactly the kind of moment it was. Someone you cared about was available. The reach was fully justified. Everything in you wanted to move toward them. You had a reason, a good one. A reason that would have held up in any conversation with any person who knew the situation. And you stopped. Not because you didn't feel it. Not because the longing wasn't real. Because something below the level of decision registered that reaching from that particular place, that quality of need, that quality of hoping the reach would answer something, would cost you something you weren't willing to trade. The hand stayed still. The message stayed unsent. It sat there in you, unwitnessed. and nobody confirmed it was the right call. And the restraint was not comfortable. This is not someone who stopped themselves easily. This is someone who stopped themselves at the exact moment the pull was strongest, when every justification was available and nothing was forcing them toward the harder direction. That specific kind of stopping, not from numbness, not from indifference, but from a thread of self-knowledge that held even under the weight of what they wanted, is a form of knowing that only arrives by having done it. You cannot borrow it. You cannot theorize your way to it. You grow it in exactly the moments when the cost of growing it is the highest. That was not the wrong person. That was the right lesson. That was not being left. That was being made. That was not an ending. That was an edit. What you built in those quiet moments, when there was no confirmation, no reward, no signal that what you were doing was worth anything, is the specific thing that makes you capable of seeing clearly today. The four truths that surface in this window require a kind of discernment that cannot be borrowed. And you grew it in exactly the way it needed to be grown, without an audience, without applause, in the daily work of choosing the harder truth over the comfortable fiction. You are not approaching this moment as someone hoping to finally get the answer. You are approaching it as someone who has already been living inside the answer without fully naming it. Today, you name it. There is a question the silence was protecting you from answering before you were ready. And the silence was not theirs. It was the universe's. Here is what would have happened if these truths had surfaced 6 months or a year earlier. You would have arrived at them still needing them to answer something about yourself. Not as information, as confirmation. The first truth about what real love actually feels like would have functioned as a measuring stick applied not to the connection in front of you, but to your own worth. Am I the kind of person who deserves this quality of love? And that question, the unresolved question of your own value placed inside the experience of recognizing love, would have made the recognition about the question instead of about the connection. You would have seen it and immediately converted it into proof. Proof that you were enough. Proof that you were worthy of receiving. And the moment you need a truth about love to answer a question about your worth, the truth stops being information and becomes evidence in a case you're still trying to win. A clarity that is fueled by the unresolved question of worth, am I enough to deserve this, bends toward confirmation rather than truth. It would have told you what you wanted to hear rather than what is actually there. That is not a small distinction. That is the difference between seeing someone accurately and seeing a reflection of your own need. The moon in Aries does not wait for readiness that is performed. It arrives for readiness that is real. And real readiness, in this specific case, is the readiness to see the four truths as facts about what you will and won't accept, not as evidence about whether you deserve them. Something finished before you knew it was finishing. Not because enough time elapsed, because you arrived somewhere genuinely different and the truths can feel it. The person in your life who is closest to the center of these four truths is not still. They are in a specific kind of internal motion right now, and it is not comfortable. This is not someone who is suppressing what they feel or rationalizing their way around it. That version already passed for them. What is happening right now is different. They are sitting at the edge of full honesty, held in place by the weight of what that honesty would require them to admit. Not about you, about themselves, about what they want, about what they have been too careful to name, because naming it would change the version of their life they have built around not naming it. The moon entering Aries today is not kind to the almost. It does not leave people at the edge. The energy of this transit is a push, not violent, not demanding, but unmistakably forward. And what this particular person is feeling right now is the internal equivalent of that push. The ground beneath the almost has shifted, and the place they have been standing, comfortable in the in-between, neither in nor fully out, no longer has the same stability it did yesterday. There is a cliff here, even if it cannot be seen from the outside. Even if every conversation with them looks the same. Even if nothing on the surface has changed, the interior is not the same. Something in them has moved to the edge of a conversation they have not yet been willing to start. And today is the day the effort required to not start that conversation has exceeded what they are willing to spend. In the specific ordinary moments of their day, something keeps arriving uninvited. Not a dramatic flood of emotion. A quiet, insistent recognition that they have been choosing the easier version of this for long enough that it has started to cost them something they didn't budget for. There is a quality to it in the body, not in the chest, but behind the eyes, in the back of the throat. In the moment between one task and the next, when there is a half second of nothing happening and the mind goes to where it always goes. They go there. They have been going there with increasing frequency. And what they find there is not ambiguity. It is a clarity they have been actively choosing not to bring out into the full light of a decision. This is not avoidance running out of fuel. This is a person arriving, slowly, at the edge of a question that honesty would require them to fully answer. What this transit does is remove the buffer between the feeling and the fact of the feeling. The wall between "I recognize what this is" and "I am ready to be honest about what this means" thins to almost nothing in this window. What they do with that thinness is theirs to decide. But the recognition is not deniable today. And a recognition that cannot be denied is already changing the interior calculation, whether or not the exterior remains still. They know. They have always known. Today is the day the knowing became too heavy to carry quietly. You are standing between two versions of yourself right now. Not between two different situations, between two different people who could receive whatever comes next. This is not a dramatic choice. The quiet ones always carry the most weight. The first version is still looking outward. Not obsessively. This is not someone collapsed into need. But the orientation is toward confirmation. Whether the person you care about signals back. Whether the external world reflects that your knowing is accurate. Whether someone else's behavior gives you permission to trust what the heart already holds. This version is intelligent. It has good reasons for looking outward. It has been burned before by trusting its own read of things, by acting on what it felt without confirming whether what it felt was real. What this version does not fully realize yet is that looking outward for confirmation of something the interior already knows is not protection. It is a particular kind of delay. Because the confirmation, when it arrives, will not feel like new information. It will feel like what you already knew, finally said out loud. And the gap between knowing and being confirmed is not a safety margin. It is just the distance between your own certainty and your willingness to trust it. The second version knows something. The first one has not fully let land yet. The four truths that are surfacing today do not require external confirmation to be real. The first truth, that real love makes you feel more like yourself, not less. Your body has been reporting this for longer than you've acknowledged it. The second truth, that genuine care is consistent, not conditional on circumstances. You have been measuring this in every interaction, keeping a record you didn't officially start. The third truth, that real love does not make you doubt your own perception. You know this one in your hands, in the specific quality of certain conversations that left you quieter and smaller than when they began. And the fourth truth, that being with someone who genuinely loves you feels like relief, not labor. You have felt that relief. You have also felt its absence. You know the difference from inside the experience, not from outside it. This is not waiting to see what someone does next. This is already knowing what you see and choosing to trust the seeing. The version of you that has already integrated these truths does not need a signal to trust what it knows. It holds the knowledge with a steadiness that has nothing defensive about it. What makes this moment unusual is not the feeling. You have felt this before. What makes it unusual is who is feeling it now. Can you feel the difference between needing the confirmation and simply having the knowing? Not as a philosophy, as a physical fact about where the weight is sitting in your body right now. The answer to that question is already in the body. It arrived before the mind formed the words. Trust what was there first. There is a contract you made, not consciously, not in language, with this connection. Or more accurately, with the pattern this connection represents. And what is completing now is not the connection. It is the agreement underneath it. The contract came to teach you the precise difference between depth and imbalance. That distinction is not obvious. Both are intense. Both are consuming. Both feel like they must be significant because of how much they cost. The difference is in the direction of the weight. In depth, both people are contributing to the weight equally. In imbalance, one person is carrying the full weight while the other holds a fraction and calls that fraction enough, or expects the carrier to call it enough, or has simply never been asked to examine what they are actually bringing. You gave from fullness. That is not the problem. The problem is that you gave from fullness in a dynamic that had a quiet expectation that your fullness would eventually create an equivalent return. That if you went deep enough, stayed present long enough, the other person would expand into the space you held open. And what the contract was trying to teach is that giving from the hope that giving will generate reciprocity is not giving from fullness. It is a transaction with deferred terms. The fullness was real. The hoping underneath it was also real. And the lesson is the difference between the two. There is grief in recognizing this. Real grief. Not the sharp kind, the slow, honest kind that arrives when you see something clearly that you have been looking at sideways for a while. The grief of recognizing that you were in depth and the other person was inconvenience. And you treated your depth as evidence of the connection's depth, when really it was only evidence of yours. Let it hurt exactly as much as it does without rushing past it. It is not punishment. It is the full size of what you actually felt, being acknowledged for the first time without apology. But here is what the grief reveals on the other side of it. Everything you gave from yourself. It was real. The imbalance was in how it was received, not in how it was offered. Your depth was not wrong. It was not too much. The problem was the container, a dynamic that could only grow in the specific direction of asking you to carry more while offering less. And calling that arrangement love. This is why the contract had to run its full course. A lesson about reciprocity cannot be learned by being told it. It can only be learned by feeling the precise difference between giving from fullness and giving from the hope of generating return. From inside the experience of doing both, across real time at real cost. The soul contract was specific. Not forever, not even reunion, but the permanent, irreversible shift in how you understand what love requires of you. And that promise has already been kept. Not in the future. Right now, in the specific clarity of being able to read the four truths as facts rather than hopes. What ends here is not the love. What ends is the version of the connection that could only exist while the lesson was still unfinished. The love, if it was real, does not require the dynamic to survive. Your body has been ahead of your mind on all four of these truths for longer than you realize. It has been running a quiet calibration that your conscious thinking has not caught up to. And the signals are specific. There is a particular quality to sleep now that was not there 6 months ago. Sleep arrives earlier, not because you are more tired, but because the part of you that used to stay awake running calculations has run out of things to calculate. Something in the background settled. The first minutes of waking carry less residue than they used to. Where there was once a subtle inventory taking as consciousness returned. Where did things stand? What needed to be monitored? What required readiness? There is now sometimes just morning, just the room. Just the uncomplicated fact of being awake before anything has been decided about what the day means. A name. If there is a specific name that has been the center of all of this, passes through awareness differently now. Not gone, present. But where it once arrived with a hook behind it, something the body braced around before the thought completed itself, it now passes through more like weather. Real, noticeable, and then gone without leaving structural damage behind it. That is not detachment. This is not the quiet of someone who has gone numb. This is the quiet of someone whose nervous system has stopped treating a thought as a threat. Those are not the same thing, and you know the difference from inside. There is a stillness in the chest that has no urgency backing it. Not emptiness, a different quality entirely. A kind of fullness that does not require anything to sustain it. You have been inside moments lately and actually been inside them, not preparing for the next one, not monitoring for the signal, actually present in the specific texture of the moment itself, what it sounds like, what the air is doing, what your hands are resting on, presence without the background process running. That is new. Where the mind once produced a constant low-level stream of questions about the connection. Is this right? Is this real? Am I reading this correctly? Should I move or stay still? It now produces something quieter. Not an answer to those questions. The questions themselves losing their urgency. Which is not the same as knowing all the answers. It is better than that. It is the body's confirmation that the answers were never going to come from thinking harder. They were going to come from here. From this exact level of quiet. Where something once felt like waiting, it now shows itself as having been preparation. Where the stillness once felt like suspension, neither here nor there, neither moving forward nor arriving, it now reads as accumulation. As something being finished quietly before it could be recognized as finished. This is not the quiet of having given up. This is the quiet of something that is genuinely finished. The body knows the difference, even when the mind is still catching up. Something is different about the quality of wanting itself. Not what you want, the quality of the wanting. How desire is sitting in your body now compared to how it was sitting 6 months ago. 6 months ago, or whatever the right increment is for you, wanting felt like reaching. There was a forward lean to it, a slight urgency at the edges, a quality of waiting for the reaching to be met. The wanting was real, but the orientation underneath it was outward. Will this be received? Will this be matched? Will the wanting eventually produce the thing being wanted? And that orientation, wanting as a posture of reaching, carried a subtle tension in it at all times. Not painful, but taut. The way a string is taut when it is waiting to be plucked. What is changed is not what you want. It is the tension. Something in the body has released from the forward lean and settled into something more vertical. The wanting is still there, specific, real, not diminished. But it is no longer aimed outward like a question waiting for an answer. It sits more like a fact about who you are. The first truth about real love. that it makes you feel more like yourself. You want that, but you no longer want it from a posture of lack. You want it from a posture of recognition. You already know what it feels like. You have felt it in moments, in flashes, in the specific quality of certain hours with certain people. You are no longer reaching towards something unfamiliar. You are reaching towards something you have already tasted. And the difference between reaching for something you've never had and reaching for something you've already known is the difference between hope and intention. The second truth, that real care is consistent, not conditional on circumstances. You used to want this with a quality of hoping. Hoping it would be demonstrated. Hoping someone would surprise you with it. What sits in you now is cleaner. You are not hoping for it. You are selecting for it. The wanting has turned from hope into discernment. It no longer has the weight of longing behind it. It has the clarity of a standard. This is why wanting and needing feel different now. One reaches from inside a deficit. One moves from inside a fullness. And the fourth truth, that being with someone who genuinely loves you feels like relief. You have stopped settling for the version that just occasionally resembles relief. The body does something specific when something resembles relief, but is not quite it. It reaches for the resemblance slightly harder than it should, as if intensity could close the gap. The body knows the difference between the actual thing and the reaching toward the almost thing. It has been registering this difference for longer than you have been naming it. Where it once said, "I hope this is real," it now says, "I can see whether it is." Where it once needed reassurance to feel certain, it now reads the room in the first conversation and trusts what it reads. The part of you that needed outside confirmation to feel certain has completed its work. What remains does not require reflection to stay real. It simply is. That is not a small change. That is the whole change. There are things that have stopped being available to your nervous system, not as rules you set, but as a physical fact about what the body will and will not move toward anymore. Being chosen only when it is convenient, only when other options have temporarily closed, your system no longer processes that as love. It used to. Not because you were naive, but because you were still running an old logic. Partial presence from the right person is worth more than full presence from the wrong one. That logic made sense once. It was even protective once. What it produced, over time, was a training program in how to receive less than you were actually offering and call the imbalance depth. The system has uninstalled that program, not as a decision, as a consequence of everything you have been through. Being someone's almost, they're for now, they're not quite ready to commit, they're close enough for the season, does not pass through your body as an option anymore. The word almost used to feel like proximity. We are almost at something real. Almost is progress. What the body knows now is that almost is its own permanent state if both people are not moving in the same direction. Almost is not progress toward a thing. It is the thing, a destination in itself. And it is not the destination you are available for. Being appreciated privately and underclaimed publicly, treated as something to return to rather than something to build toward. There is a specific quality to that dynamic that your body now registers immediately. Like a frequency that was once in the background and is now fully audible. You notice it in the first conversation. You notice it in what someone says and what they carefully don't say. You notice it in the gap between how they treat you when no one is watching and how they present you when someone is. That gap used to feel like something to work around. Now it reads as information about the structure of what is being offered. And the information is not ambiguous. This is not hardness. Hardness closes. What this is the fourth truth arriving in the body in its most complete form. Real love feels like relief, and what does not feel like relief is not it. That recognition no longer requires deliberation. It no longer requires a list of evidence or a cooling-off period before it is trusted. It simply arrives. The way the eye adjusts when it enters real light after a long time in something dimmer. Not gradually, all at once. With the particular clarity of someone who has spent enough time examining the almost real thing to know at first contact what the real one feels like. There is no forcing required. There is no deliberation. The difference is simply apparent, immediate, complete. You did not close yourself, you clarified. And clarity does not reduce what is possible. It removes what was never going to be real anyway, and makes the remaining space available for what actually is. If the person at the center of these truths steps back into your field now, the question that governs your interior will not be whether you still want them. You know the answer to that. The question, the one that matters, the one this work has been building you toward, is whether what returns is actually different, or whether it is the same version of the dynamic wearing the language of change. The question of whether they return is no longer the question that governs your interior. But the answer, when it arrives, will be legible, clearly, immediately, without the distortion of need bending the signal. Here is what that looks like from the inside. If they return, you will be present. Genuinely, fully present. Not braced, not scanning for confirmation that the return is real, not already rehearsing the conversation where you ask them to prove they've changed. Present in the same way you have learned to be present with yourself in this period, inside the moment, reading what is actually there rather than what you want to be there, without hope bending the signal in one direction and fear bending it in the other. That presence is not neutrality. It is accuracy. And accuracy, in this case, is the only gift you can give both of you. What the body will register first is not what they say, it is the quality of them. Whether the second truth is alive, whether the care is consistent from the first moment, or whether it arrives in waves that depend on factors you're not in charge of. Whether the third truth holds, whether being in their presence makes you feel more certain of your own perception, or quietly less certain, in the way that certain interactions leave you slightly less solid than when you entered them. Whether the fourth truth is there, the relief. Real love, when it returns with full presence behind it, does not feel like a reunion that you have to manage. It feels like setting something down. And if they do not return, or if what returns is the same dynamic in different language, what that confirms is simple and important. The four truths were never about them. They were always about what you are available for. What you have built an interior large enough to receive. What the contract always intended to leave you with, regardless of what any specific person decides to do with their portion of the story. The ground beneath you holds in either direction. Their return arrives into something already whole, already reading clearly, already oriented, already knowing the difference between what is real and what resembles real. Their non-return confirms, without requiring anything from you in response, what you already know. That the four truths were never contingent on what they decided. They were always yours, permanently, independent of any witness. What the heart already knows does not become less true because no one has confirmed it out loud yet. It waits, with the same patient insistence it has always had, until the conditions that required its acknowledgement have been met. Today, they have. If something in this landed somewhere specific, not just your mind, but your body, do one thing right now. Like this video, not as a gesture, as a signal to yourself that you were present for this. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. These transmissions build on each other. What opens today connects directly to what arrives in the next window. And in the comments, write, "I already know." Say it out loud as you type it, for your own nervous system. Words spoken with real meaning complete something that silent reading leaves unfinished. And if someone in your life is standing at a threshold they can't quite name, share this with them. Your soul already knows who. The 4 truths that surface today. That real love makes you feel more like yourself. That genuine care is consistent. That real love does not cloud your perception. That it arrives as relief and not labor. These were always in you. They were not delivered from the outside. The moon entering Aries today. Simply remove the last layer of noise between you and what the heart has been quietly, patiently holding. What you see now when you look at the connections in your life is not new information. It is old information without the static. And what becomes visible in the silence, the static left behind, who loves you, how, in what quality, is something you don't need to debate anymore. You see it. Clearly, finally, in the specific way that can only happen once you've asked yourself enough hard questions that the comfortable fictions no longer have anywhere to stand. That is not a small thing. That is everything the work was always moving toward.